So often when we think of home composting, we think of something like this. It's hidden in our back corner, but that doesn't always have to be the case. Joining us today is Joshua Campbell here at Oklahoma County Extension Office. Hi, Joshua. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I know you're like an expert on composting, and you've got several examples around here at the Extension Office.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. I think a lot of people can relate about this scenario.
Well, I don't know that I'd call myself a composting expert, but I've done a lot of different types of composting, so I've failed a lot for sure.
So let's talk through, is this working or does this not work? This is obviously one of those 3-bin methods.
Yeah.
It's had a little neglect, it seems.
Yeah. So this is a good example of what can happen when you neglect a compost pile, like you said. So we're actively managing this right before everything shut down with COVID, and then basically it's just sat static since then. But what I like about this is it's a great example of the fact that compost happens whether we're actively managing it or not. Now, we can arguably get better compost by putting some systems around it and by following steps and procedures and processes, but compost is just a natural process of decomposition. And so we've got compost happening right here, even though it's not pretty.
Right. So on top, obviously it looks like some newer stuff that's been added on there, but you've got plenty of good stuff down underneath there.
Right.
So is this kind of the best system, or I know there's a lot of products for homeowners, the tumbler, we've talked on our show about the keyhole garden. Let's talk through some of those different products.
So what I've tried to do here is showcase a bunch of the different options that are available to homeowners. When people think about composting, they most often picture this 3-bin, or what we might call a New Zealand composting system, a large structure in your backyard. But this isn't the best fit for everybody. So we've got tumblers. Tumblers are a great option for folks that are in smaller spaces, that don't want to deal with an open eyesore like this, maybe that are afraid of pest issues that can come along with composting. So tumblers can be a great option for that. Now, with any composting style, there are pros and there are cons. And so I'm a big fan of the saying, there's a compost pile to fit everyone's style. And I truly believe that. No matter who you are, what your circumstances are, I think there's a composting method that could fit you, but it's a matter of identifying what that is and weighing the pros and cons of every kind of method.
Is there, I know you work with a lot of gardeners here, is there one that's kind of preferred over others, or?
I don't know. I think it really comes down to individual preference. I would say the one that I think people get most excited about, or there's the most energy, is vermicomposting.
Okay.
People using the worm bins and seeing the worms turn food scraps or whatever material into just beautiful black gold is pretty cool. So people get excited about that and kind of get the ooh factor of worms.
And so are those kept in the garden? Let's talk a little bit about some of that. I mean, or do you keep those outside or in your own home?
So you can do both. You can build larger worm bins that are set up outside. Now, red wigglers, which are the most commonly used worms for worm composting, really do have some temperature preferences, and so their population may shrink and swell with weather. So in the middle of winter, they'll probably move into the interior of a pile if it's outside, and you may have some population loss. So there are some considerations if you want to raise them outside, but you can do that. Most people, especially home gardeners, propagate them inside. So I actually have a number of bins in our office. I have one right underneath my desk that I feed lunch scraps to, and we have a few just different places around the office that we feed, and actually use those to propagate worms all year so that we can give them to folks when we do build your own worm bin composting classes, or when we teach our master composter class in the fall.
And I know, especially inside, the biggest thing that comes to mind is the smell. But there shouldn't be a smell if you're doing it right, correct?
If you do it right, there's minimal odor. You certainly have to be careful about not feeding too much and too much of stinky stuff, getting a good layer of material over whatever you're feeding. But you're right, if you're composting properly with worms, they're gonna be churning through that material very quickly, and as they process it, they're gonna really not have much odor to the bin. There can be times where it gets a little too wet or a little too dry, and there's a little bit of manipulation that needs to happen, but for the most part it really doesn't stink. I have a bin right under my desk and I don't ever notice it. Maybe it's nasal memory or something, but I don't get complaints from people that visit my office.
So it's sort of like cooking a stew. You got to have the right ingredients, but there's a little bit of give and take into what can go in there.
Right.
Also, along those lines though, there's the moisture. it is sort of a reaction you're creating, an exothermic reaction. So let's talk a little bit about the heat, the temperature, and you've got another project going where you're creating heat intentionally.
Right. So with a worm bin or vermicomposting, that's a cold composting process. So you really don't want to create heat. That's going to drive the worms out. We consider that a cold process for composting. However, most composting methods, you want to generate heat if possible, because that's going to speed up that composting process, and it's also going to eliminate weed seeds and disease pathogens and things that could be in the material that you started composting with. So that's, when you think about a 3-bin system in this kind of way that we're composting here, while composting is happening, the weed seeds and things that we're putting in here are going to carry through that composting material because we haven't hot composted. So when we hot compost, there are a lot of benefits, not only getting compost faster, but just some of the other things that you can do to harness the power of that heat with composting.
Okay. So what is the little project you've got going over? You did some layer composting. Talk about why you've got that covered right now.
So again, we're trying to showcase all sorts of things that people can do in their backyard easily. And so this project that you're referencing is basically just a small little pile. We took some wood chips. We got a local tree service that was willing to dump a load of wood chips for us. And then we took some food scraps from our office and that we were able to gather, and we layered the food scraps and the wood chips, just kind of made some layering, just a small little pile. And we're using the heat that radiates off of that pile to be potentially just an extra space where we can warm seedlings in the winter, or if we've got a flat of plants that were cool season plants that we're going to put in the ground we haven't planted yet, we could utilize it as a space to protect them on really cold nights where we might have risk of a freeze.
All right. So you might be able to utilize that for some root zone heating on some seedlings.
Exactly.
And
Just give some nice root zone heating. Exactly.
Excellent. Well, thanks. I know there's a lot more to talk about composting, and we will be back. So thank you, though, for sharing this with us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this video as part of our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. You can also find even more videos on the OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel. And join us on social media for great gardening tips, photos, and discussion.